May 16th, 2015. We're going to hear from David Brian Berry. And David Berry was an ILC guide, and now he does readings. And he's going to tell you his story of experiences with Paul in the fellowship.
Well, the story of me and Paul in the fellowship is the story of my life since the day I met him, because ILC became central to my life. And I can hardly remember what I thought it was. I met Paul when I came to Virginia Beach in July of 1974 with a baby son who was ill and dying. And through a marvelous series of circumstances, found my way to Paul within a few hours, and Paul did a deep trance reading with a set of recommendations that saved his life. And since I'm speaking to strangers here, my son was at his birth weight at a year, and he had failure to thrive. And he had been in several medical centers. But for various reasons, things were not working, and Paul recommended one short paragraph for him. He said, give him cow's milk diluted with a calcium preparation, whose name I'm forgetting, a 19th century pharmaceutical that made the milk quite alkaline. He said, rub him with etomidine, give him etomidine, an iodine supplement that Edgar Cayce formulated. Rub him with peanut oil and don't go near him when you're afraid. And at the very end of the reading, he said, almost in passing, this won't go away overnight. You'll need to take steps, but his language, this one can get good guidance in his dreams, and he'll need to do that. Now, that was the graduate school of dreaming for me. So Simeon recovered quite dramatically. He gained 7 ounces in the first week, and he continued to recover. And he grew up straight and strong, and we never went through that again. So for me, it was Paul's readings that brought me to the fellowship and to inner light consciousness. It was a few years after that I invited Paul. I had been meeting in a Bible study group with David Duncombe, the chaplain of the medical school at Yale, and John Carr, the chaplain of the Gaylord Rehabilitation Hospital. And we invited Paul to come and address the medical school in April of 1977. And he did come. And he spoke before an overflow crowd of doctors, medical students, nurses, and nursing students in the Fitkin Amphitheater, which is a surgical amphitheater in the hospital there, and made a tremendous impression. And typical for Paul's story, I was then the director of public relations for Yale New Haven Hospital. I stood up in front of that crowd of highly qualified strangers and said, I've had a mystical experience and it changed my life, and this man made it happen. Well, that was probably the first time I'd ever spoken in public about my inner life. Well, Paul gave me my inner life, gave me the tools to live out of it and not have it happen to me. That isn't the only thing he gave me. It probably isn't even the best thing he gave me, but that was the first step into my new life. It was a few months later that I came back to the fellowship in July of 77, and I believe he called it the July experience. It must have been 100, 140 people here. And his closest students literally returned the day it began from the 40 days in the wilderness experience, which was a life-changing experience for every one of them. And so I came to that experience, and I was one of the folks who spoke. And it wasn't long before I came back to stay. And a few months after that, with what I thought was inadequate training, Paul sent me out on the road as an ILC guide to teach first workshops, and then the experience he created, which in those days was a 10-evening spiritual experience that included meditation, the 7 terraces meditation, the temple, healing, prayer, and a great many teachings that I had no label for. How to live this spiritual life. Yes, I had known people who knew how to enter meditation and have spiritual experiences. I really had never met anyone before who said, this is how you turn it into a life that works. And that is what he taught, above all. So that experience for me, I went on the road and began to teach and stayed on the road for 2 years, teaching Paul's material, meeting many wonderful people and seeing many wonderful things, which I did not make happen, but I did get to be there. So the ILC that I have practiced ever since does consist of that 7 terrace meditation, and I have done it daily since 1977. And I have remained linked by love to the people whom I met that very first week in Virginia Beach in 1977. And of course I've just spent a few days here with a remarkable number of them. And none of us has become another Paul Solomon. And when I often said that's exactly what he didn't want, for us to become another Paul Solomon. Each of us became instead the people that we really are. I had been a photojournalist and a teacher of photography. I taught it at Yale, and I taught writing there as well for a number of years, lived in the college with my family. I didn't know anybody who was teaching people how to become themselves. And I had heard some very fine minds in my time at Yale. Paul was teaching you how to reach inside yourself and find that light and not gain great spiritual experiences or great concepts, but practice the ability to walk hand in hand with that light. That's what he taught me. He used language similar to that. I'm paraphrasing. And I've done that, even though for years at a time, I probably didn't do it very well because I've had an ordinary human life with my share of mistakes. And have I become a better person? I've certainly become a better person than I was the first time I took Inner Light Consciousness in 1977. He also, by example more than by teaching, taught me that what we find inside is not personal. We're all part of something. That it sustains us and transforms us and connects us. This would be my language now. It keeps us in the flow of the river that human life is. And that is priceless. I don't know that I ever have good language for that unless there's a person in front of me with an issue in hand or a problem. Or sometimes with joy overflowing, which was characteristic of ILC from its earliest days and is still characteristic. The ILC I learned from Paul is not a heavy burden or a somber walk. It's a joyful living experience that changes, I have to say, every time you use it. It's an experience, it's a practice. There are concepts. And yes, they are the concepts that if you read the ancient wisdom, you will read there. But I wouldn't even say they were put in modern language. I would say they're given to you in a form so you can apply them and have them come to life in the life you're living right now. And I do believe that in 2015 we are living a life as a planet, as a human race, as a member of this spiritual entity. It is unique. It's being lived for the first time. It's brand new. And if we're going to be part of it, we have to keep moving forward and becoming brand new. So I guess the language that's in the literature of ILC may have grown a little dated, but the experience will never be dated. It remains fresh. And every time I come with a problem, with a prayer, with a failure to forgive myself for, it's there for me. And it's fresh every time. I have never witnessed a healing, a transformation that's gone the same way twice. We are very complex beings. This is a complex life, and it's not personal. And it's joyful, it's full of life, it's full of surprises. I can't picture what I would have become without it. And I'm not done yet. My life goes on. So I made a life with my children, with my family, with the work I did in the world. I became a school psychologist. I worked with special ed children for 25 years. I might have done that without Paul Solomon, but I certainly would have done it very, very differently. So what Paul gave me is still giving, still shaping my experience and what I do. Now, what was it like to know Paul? First, this above all, I came because of the reading that saved my son's life, and I don't often tell this part of this story, but it saved my life too. I was worn out bashing against a problem I could not solve, and I had simply spent myself. I had nothing left to come at this problem fresh with. That reading changed my life. That's why I went down to Virginia Beach a few years later. And to sit in a room when Paul was teaching, I won't call it a classroom, to sit in a room where Paul was teaching was an experience that has never been matched ever since for me. He opened the door, he gave me the tools, and more than that, he gave me the support, then let me taste that teaching experience. I wouldn't say it's the same experience Paul had, but he did that for a lot of people. He made teachers out of a lot of people, and every one of them went on to teach. Sharon said this a minute ago, to teach what they had become, to show what they were. That's the common thread in ILC. We became ourselves, and outwardly, some of us aren't so extraordinary. Inwardly, this is the most extraordinary group I've ever encountered. That continues to be true. This is a family in such a large sense, I don't have words for it. All of us walk forward as part of a family. What comes to us, what we share, what we get to be a part of, sustains us and makes life new. And we truly are a family. Still. Now, some of the external forms that Paul created almost vanished. School of the Prophets, the School at Carmel, Hearthfire Lodge, other things. ILC, Light Consciousness itself, is not a very big organization at the moment. It's far from asleep. It's certainly far from dead. And when I get around in the world and I'm in some other country and I encounter someone who shared that teaching with Paul, it's like we've known each other from childhood. It's still working.